There are people who say that if you let plants get the upper hand in the garden, it's a recipe for disaster. Well, it ain't necessarily so. Certainly not on this area of gravel garden here, because the tall candles of Verbascum and the airy candelabras of Verbena bonariensis have seeded themselves about beautifully. A perfect combination, and nothing to do with me. You do get some funny letters, you know, when you garden on the telly. Nurseryman wrote to me a few weeks ago. He said, "I do wish you'd stop teaching people how to take cuttings, because it does nurserymen like me out of business." I thought it's rather like saying there shouldn't be any cookery programmes on the telly, otherwise people won't go out to restaurants. But when shrubs are growing as vigorously as they are at this time of year, I'm blowed if I'm not going to teach you how to take cuttings from them. Whether what you do is entirely up to you. You can still go to the nursery, but these are what you're looking for. Side shoots here on flowering currant. The top is quite squishy. Lower down, it's still pliable, but firmer. It's what we call semi-ripe. And you can remove these shoots just above a leaf because they make brilliant cuttings. By making your cuts just above a leaf like that, there's no danger of any snag of stem dying back and allowing fungus diseases to enter the plant. And each of these little beauties will make a new shrub. Preparation's fairly straightforward. Leave a couple of fully expanded leaves at the top, peel off all the others below, and then make a basal cut just below the leaf joint this time with your knife, so that the entire cutting is between 3 and 4 inches long. That's all there is to it. Now you can simply insert those in cuttings compost in a propagator, but if you haven't got a propagator and all you've got is a windowsill, there is a really nifty, easy, cheap way of rooting cuttings. You need a strip of polythene about 5 inches wide and just over a foot long. Lay it down on a firm surface, then get some multi-purpose compost. You only need about 2 or 3 handfuls, and trickle it down the centre of the polythene. Then you can lay the cuttings on it so that the base of the cutting rests in the centre of that compost. Space the cuttings about 1.5 inches apart and go right the way along that run of polythene. And then when you get to the end, fold the polythene up so that you're containing all that compost, like that, and then roll it up like a Swiss roll. Making sure the compost doesn't spill out too much. And when you get to the other end, bring that final piece around, get an elastic band to hold it all together, and there you have an instant little pot. Water it very, very carefully so you don't get it too soggy in there. There are no drainage holes. Stand them on your windowsill. They stand up just like that, and you beat me to it, didn't you? As soon as they're rooted, you can see the roots coming out of the polythene, and they can be potted up individually or planted out in the garden where they're to grow. You can try this technique with all manner of shrubs. Well, if they don't root, well, you haven't lost anything, have you? It's the most magical form of gardening propagation. I never lose the thrill for it. One man was even moved to give up the high life and go and start a nursery in Suffolk.
10 years ago, Michael Loftus gave up a thriving whole food business in Covent Garden. He'd been getting up at 5 in the morning to commute from East Suffolk, and he was getting home at silly hours. He'd had enough. Frankly, he wanted to stay near here, and who can blame him? So he applied for a job as a milkman near the village of Weston. Luckily, he didn't get the job.
I started the nursery when I was 43. I knew nothing really about plants. The last time I had had a garden was when I was 11, so I had a lot to learn. Now, 9 years later, I grow over 3,000 varieties of plants. It has been a wonderful 9 years. I've never made so many mistakes and had so many successes. The nursery stretches to about 1 acre. This is the sunny side, and we've arranged all the sunny plants in alphabetical order here.
There's a huge variety of plants in quite a small space. Now I've spotted some campanulas which are a particular favourite of mine.
Yes, this is a splendid plant. It has none of the vices of any of the campanulas and all the virtues. It has these wonderful deep violet lustrous bells, lovely clean green foliage, grows vigorously to about 4 or 5 foot, will survive in any soil which is not too dry. Repeat flowers, cut it down this time of the year and it will be back in flower in about 6 weeks' time. No, it's a perfect plant. No disease, no pests, absolutely perfect.
And then you've got the pinks as well.
Yes, Laudanana there, lovely thing. That's a lactiflora campanula, grows to about 4 or 5 feet. Interesting thing about lactifloras is that you can stop them flowering at this time of the year by cutting them back at beginning of June, and then they'll flower end of August, beginning of September. So if you have a clump of 3 or so, you can cut back a couple of them, and so you get this extended flowering period.
Well, this is another plant with plenty of oomph.
Yeah, this is Geranium silostemum, another wonderful, majestic, noble plant which will compete in any herbaceous border. Got lovely magenta flowers with dark centres, beautiful, very pronounced seed heads, and then this lovely cut foliage, which in the autumn goes wonderful burnished colours of orange and red. It's one of the few hardy geraniums which will actually stand alone as a specimen plant. It has got such presence. And over here we've got Geranium himalayense gravetie. I think this is one of the best of the blues. It flowers over a much longer period than Johnson's blue. Got a slight pink edge to the foliage as well.
Very pretty. And speaking of pink, I've just spotted something else there.
Oh, that's lovely. That's Mavis Simpson, a lovely hybrid from Traversii elegans, and it preserves the lovely shell pink flowers of Traversii elegans and the lovely silvery green foliage. Very long flowering, totally non-invasive. All the stems come out from a central crown. It doesn't run like Andressias. No, wonderful, really garden-worthy plant. Beautiful.
Lovely gentle colour, isn't it?
Yes, it's beautiful. Yeah. I love grasses. I think they're wonderful. What I particularly like about them is the movement in them. They're absolutely beautiful, so graceful, so airy.
This is
beautiful.
gorgeous, this steeper.
Easy plant to grow, as long as you've got well-drained soil. All steepers are really the same. They need sun and good drainage. It needs to be near the front of the border because, as you see over here, it has this lovely arching habit. So if you bury it in a border, you really won't see it.
I think it's such a good idea to have an area where you can see the plants in a garden situation.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yes, lovely.
That's another steeper. That's Steeper capillata. And steepers are a irreproachable family. They haven't produced one bad member, I think. It can't be said of most families, can it?
It strikes me that the garden is all about structure and scale.
I think scale most important of all. I think in a small garden, you must reach upwards and grab the sky. It's terribly important to have big trees and big herbaceous plants in small gardens. That way you colonise a bit of the sky, you drag it down into your garden and make your garden that much bigger. When you walk between 2 herbaceous border, they shouldn't look like sort of rockeries. They've really got to have mass in them. And look at that Acanthus spinosus, how hard it's working, both in its ascending lines and the texture of its foliage, and next door to it the cardoon similarly. They're wonderful plants. It's the sort of kind of impressionistic massing of different textures which I'm so interested in the garden. And that's the lovely thing about gardening, that there's so many different worlds you can enter which are so different.
It's midsummer and I'd normally be concentrating my efforts on maintaining all those plants that have already started to crop. But it's also the perfect time to do everything I can to extend the growing period by planting crops that are going to keep me going throughout the winter. Earlier in the season I started some potato comparison trials, largely so I could see any differences in pest and disease resistance. Now I've already started lifting some of the earlies, both Foremost and Lady Crystal, and although both have cropped quite well, there's some interesting results. Lady Crystal seems to have more of a tendency to produce green tubers. Now, they were all earthed up to the same extent, and because green potatoes are poisonous, the fact that this seems to be cropping close to the surface is an obvious disadvantage. But on the other hand, With the foremost, there's definitely a higher incidence of fungal scab and also of surface wireworm damage. Now the wireworm in particular could become quite a problem because on crops that I lift slightly later, there's more of a chance that those wireworms are going to have actually tunnelled into the tubers, which is going to make those really pretty unappetising. Now, having lifted those earlies, I've now fertilised the ground really well because I'm going to go ahead and plant some second cropping potatoes, which should give me new potatoes at Christmas time. I've chosen the varieties Carlingford and Exqueezer because they're renowned for a gorgeous flavour. And although I've not actually done this before, it's now become really quite easy to get hold of suitable seed potatoes at this time of year. You don't even need to chit them because the weather conditions now mean that they're going to sprout and grow away really, really easily. These should be ready for lifting come October, but in most weather conditions you should actually be able to leave the tubers in the ground until Christmas or even New Year. The only thing you're going to have to watch out for is the possibility of early frost, which could knock off those haulms, so if necessary you may need to cover them with fleece later in the year.
Hemerocallis, or daylilies, are one of the glories of the midsummer garden. Not only do they produce a spectacular array of colourful blooms, but they're also one of the easiest perennials to grow. The 20 or so species originated mainly from the Far East, where they've been grown since the time of Confucius as a food crop. The whole flower head is edible and tastes a bit like lettuce. Since their arrival in this country in the 16th century, nearly 40,000 named cultivars have been raised, and most of them are fully hardy. Older varieties are closest to the natural species, which are mainly yellow and scented. For example, Hyperion, which dates from 1924, may have a small yellow flower, but it has retained the strong, sweet fragrance of the species. One of the older evergreen varieties is Cartwheels. With its rounded, flatter, open form, it showed the way for the modern cultivars. It's a reliable variety with flowers that open late in the day. For an early splash of colour, Buzzbomb cannot be beaten. This American variety produces an abundance of warm, rusty red flowers with recurved sepals and a clear orange throat. Because it's a low form, it's ideal for the front of the border. For something in a really sumptuous purple, how about Strutter's Ball with its wonderful wine-coloured petals, with that very, very delicate ruffled white edge, and just by way of contrast, a lime green throat. Hemerocallis are extremely forgiving plants and will perform well in most gardens. Like any plant, they benefit from being treated kindly, especially a generous application of a low nitrogen fertiliser throughout the growing season. They don't like poor drainage and shallow, limey soils, but they will thrive in sun-baked dry spots. Although known as daylilies, individual flowers can last up to 2 days, and most varieties will bloom for 4 to 5 weeks. A tip for achieving the finest floral displays is to water well while the buds are forming, and obviously remove flowers as they fade. This variety of Hemerocallis is called Corky, and this is my absolute favourite. These wonderful little cheeky yellow flowers are held on purple stems above a mat of lush green foliage. It really is fantastic.
Philadelphus, the mock orange, needs rather more drastic treatment. Now, it flowers on wood that's at least 1 year old, but then as that wood gets older, it starts to peter out and lose its vigour, and you need to encourage a succession of younger shoots that can take over. So at this time of year, when it's finished flowering, trace back these old shoots and cut them out at their point of origin. You can take a proportion of this older wood out every summer after flowering. It keeps the plant youthful, and it allows these young flexing stems to harden up this coming autumn and carry flowers in succeeding years. It is, for obvious reasons, called renewal pruning. course, the most fun things to prune are topiary specimens. Now, yew doesn't generally get clipped if it's a hedge until about August. Then growth has stopped and it will stay trim and crisp and even right the way through the winter. But peacocks like these, yes, it is a peacock, not an elephant. You can do them several times during the year to encourage them to really get dense and crisp up. Got to be a bit careful. One false snip and your peacock becomes a peahen. What you'll find after a while is that the dried sap makes your blades stick together, so a bit of emery paper just rubbed over the blades frees them up. And you can get back to your snipping. Little off the top, sir. Could always be a tufted duck. I love yew in the garden because it gives you form, shape and texture at every time of year, even in the dead of winter. And it's also a useful plant. These clippings can all be used in the treatment of cancer. One down, 5 to go. I think I'll do something a bit softer first. Beds and borders can start to look a bit raddled at this time of year, but there's nothing wrong with that. I like to see a good overblown summer border, but you do need to decide which plants you want to let run to seed and which are just going to be a pain in the neck. Now I've got here red campion, not particularly pernicious or invasive. All I need to do here is tap those seed heads to dislodge the seeds and let them fall in and among. I don't want to get rid of them yet. What I do want to get rid of, a sweet rocket, which goes absolutely everywhere. That can be scissored off. And lady's mantle. Now this can become a real pest. So as soon as the flowers start going over on both these, take your shears to them and get rid of them. Probably saying to yourself, oh, but it looks so pretty. Well, it does, but you've got to catch it just as this lime green stage starts to go over and it starts to get brown, because that's when it loses its seeds. Now, if you think this is torture, it's as nothing compared with what plants have to put up with by the sea. Salt-laden winds charging in across the English Channel. That's what they've got to cope with in Trudi Harrison's garden. Here's her guide to survival by the sea.
Gardening by the sea is by no means easy. This is East Wittering in West Sussex. Wittering is Roman for windy, and it is windy here. It comes bouncing in off that sea like an 80-ton elephant playing hockey with your borders. But there are positive sides to gardening by the sea. There are thousands of plants you can plant, and there are also thousands of ways you can protect your plants. One of the ways I found of getting round this dreadful wind is by using wind netting. It doesn't necessarily have to be unsightly. I just use simple decorations like a rope. Another way I found of combating the wind was by sinking my lawn. It served two purposes, because this being north-facing, it really was a mud pit in the middle of winter. You'd come out here and sink. But now you come out here, and even in the depths of winter with no sunlight, this is such a pleasant place to be. One of the glories of coastal gardening is you don't get frost. This means cannas will naturalise. You never lift a lily, and you can grow little gems like this. This is Ipomoea, an unusual Ipomoea. Now we come over to what I call my tropical garden. It absolutely amazes me every time. I'm in a north-facing garden in heavy clay, and there is absolutely no way these plants should be doing what they're doing. Little plants like the Lobelia laxifolia, which is very, very rare and remains evergreen constantly, despite the fact that it doesn't see any sun at all. The beautiful solamnum, kangaroo apple. Again, that remains constantly evergreen. And it's such a beautiful plant to see in the winter with that cut leaf. Oh, look, my little friend's out. This is Amelia sonchifolia. It grows in the tropics, and she's actually a food that's used in salads out there. People say to me, oh, you've got a bad back, why are you gardening? I'm gardening because I like gardening. I'm also gardening because I don't touch this with a fork or anything. The only thing I do is January time, I come out here, I put some compost on, the worms do the digging for me, nobody else. This is where the fairies live. And the giant spiders. This is the woodland cottage. This is the sole charge of my children. They're in charge of the boxes, and they've grown their own sweet peas. And here's the first aid kit. This is aloe vera. If they have sunburn, prickly heat, even a tiny little rash, I just rub that on, and magically, it goes away. One of the main reasons for failure in a coastal garden is that people try and copy inland gardens. It's not going to work. However hard you try, you're going to fail miserably. The salt will get into the leaves and it will burn them alive. You've got to look at a stronger type of plant, something like Fatsia japonica that grows in the coastal forests of Japan. Strappy leaves like the cordyline, they can whip around absolutely wonderfully in the wind, and they are absolutely untroubled by the salt. We're leading on now down to where I do most of my sitting, thinking and reading. My husband built these for me out of driftwood. And of course, every girl that lives by the sea's got to have her porthole. And I had one out of a washing machine. Ahoy there! Over here I've got a water butt. It doesn't look like a water butt. I painted it up, chopped the top off, planted it up, and hey presto, it's not as obtrusive in the garden. And then, of course, you've got the modern art. Again, from a junk shop, another wacky idea.
Whatever the weather, whether you're inland or by the sea, enjoy your garden. Ta-da.
She's led gardening tours in places as far-flung as China and South Africa. But Christine Walton is staying a little closer to home next here on UK TV Gardens. Stay with us for another look around Christine's garden.